Okay, so in order to um, begin our fire simulation, we first have to create a 3D fluid container. So I'm just going to go into my FX menu and go into fluids and just hit 3D container. And this object here is going to be my wick, and it's just a simple cylinder. So I'm just gonna start to scale my container just so it fits at the top of my wick. So I'm just gonna make these dimensions like 5. I'm gonna do 5, 5, 5, and I can just translate that container up to the top of my wick. It's right about there, maybe. And my wick is going to be emitting the fire, so I'm going to just want to delete the emitter that comes with the container. So if we open up our fluid in the outliner, you can see we have this fluid emitter. So we can click it here, or we can just drag and click it there and delete it. And now to make the wick emit the fluid, I'm just going to click my container, click my object, go to fluids, and add edit contents, emit from object. So now if I play, you'll see it starts to emit. I'm just going to make my timeline 1,000 frames so we don't run out of time. So now we can see we're emitting that fluid. So let's start to get into our container. Up here we see our base resolution. This is basically how detailed our fluid simulation is in the viewport and in our render. We don't really want to go too high while we're messing with the settings, but I'm just going to bring it to like a 60 or 70 for now. And we'll see how that looks. So it gets a little slower too, but it's much more detailed. Okay. So right now we can see while it plays, it hits the ceiling and kind of collides with the ceiling. So it looks cool, but that's not really what we want. So we want to get rid of these boundaries here. I'm just gonna get rid of the X and Z boundaries, and because I don't want it to collide with the ceiling, I'm just gonna only have my boundary be a negative Y, so that it only collides with this floor and not the ceiling. I might actually not even need the negative Y for here, just because it's not really colliding with anything actually. So now if we play it, it kind of goes through the ceiling now, doesn't really collide. So we got rid of our boundaries. Now let's start to get into some of the dynamics. So we go into our dynamic simulation, we see we have regular gravity. The only other value here that we're really going to mess with is the damp, and that's just gonna dampen the rest of the effects that we add on later, just because it's kind of might be a little overkill with some of these effects, and we kind of want to simmer it down with the flame. So I'm just gonna start off with a value of 0.1, and I might edit that later. And for substeps, this is also just for more detailed effect, so I might leave that at 1 for now, but I might increase it to like 2 or 3 later, and then yeah, we'll hit that later. Alright, let's start. So buoyancy kind of varies the mass density around your flame, so it adds a little not turbulence, but kind of varies the density around the flame, so we might want to boost that to like 10 for now. Dissipation will kind of dissipate your flame as it reaches the top, which is what we want. We don't want to travel all the way to the ceiling, so we might put a dissipation value, maybe 1.5 for now. See how that works. And then, so maybe tension. The tension kind of forces our fluid to round its shape a bit, like our flame. So we might start with something like 0.2 for now. See how that works later. And then we have velocity and turbulence. We can hit on those later to have a little more of a natural and realistic flame. And then if we open up temperature, right now it's all grayed out because we haven't added a dynamic grid to temperature yet. So if we go up to our content methods, we only have density and velocity set to dynamic grid, so we just have to turn temperature to dynamic grid. So now that should not be grayed out anymore. Okay, so let's play it now, see what we got. So it looks pretty good so far. It looks like it's traveling a little high. If we do an IPR render, it's very light, and we don't really need any more other lights to see our flame, just because it's emitting light from the flame. But once we add more temperature, detail, and then we get into shading, it'll bring out the color a lot more. So we already added buoyancy and tension into our density tab here. I'm just going to add some more into the temperature. So temperature can get a much more higher buoyancy value. So I'm going to boost this to like 70 or 80 even. So that's high number. Don't really want it to diffuse. Dissipation. Maybe do a value like 0.5. And then tension also 0.2. Get that shape. See how that plays out. Okay. See how that renders. Okay, so still need to add some color. So we can come back to these values later, but I'm going to start shading. So right now there's no fall off. There is a cube fall off, but we want a spherical fall off because we have that rounded shape for that flame. So if I hit sphere, you can start to see if I increase this drop off, it's very subtle, but if I increase the drop off, you start to see it fall offs much more at the bottom. So I'm going to start there. And transparency, we might want to make this a darker color to make it a little more visible. Okay, something like that. And even more so here, we can set our color input to density and set this to maybe like a dark, maybe black or a gray. And then I'll set this to something a little lighter. And then we have this input bias, which is basically saying how much power we're giving this effect. It's kind of like an effect opacity almost. So the lower it is, the less dense. And as we increase it to a lighter value, if we turn this up to white, it's even more dense. So we can control the density here. So maybe I'll leave it something like that. If we do our IPR render, it's a little more visible there. For color, so this is a little confusing how it's like laid out, but basically this is the kind of like the outside of the flame, and as we come closer to the right, it's like this is the outside, and this is the inside of the flame. So if we bring this over, we're going to get kind of like a tighter edge. If we bring this over here, it's kind of we kind of get a very soft edge, but for a flame it's a little sharper. So we're going to bring this over this. I'm going to make this color, so this is going to be the inside. I'm going to make it much brighter, so I'm going to increase this to like 5, and maybe bring this a little over, so it's a very bright color. I'm going to get some more orange in here and maybe lighten that up and brighten it up too, but not quite as bright. So I have a little gradation. Make it orange. We can start to see what that's doing there. And again, we have our input bias. So input bias for here is basically saying that as we go left, it's becoming more black, and as we go right, it's kind of hitting more of these colors here. So we can just increase that, something like that maybe. Okay, so we're getting a stronger color there, and we can always come back and tweak this, which I'm probably going to do. So for opacity, it's set to density. So basically we're going to control how dense the inside and outside of the flame is going to be. So if I open this up, I'm going to bring this down. So right now there's no density. I'm going to bring it up here, so it's very dense, and then just kind of bring it in around the edges. So I really have a lot of control over how this is going to look. So it takes a little bit of tweaking, just moving these points around. Okay. Maybe something like that. And then again, we have our input bias. So as we go left, it's much less dense. As we go right, it's more dense. We don't want to be too dense. Maybe we'll leave it at that for now. Yeah. Something like that. Let's play this back. So a very tall flame right now. Just not what we want. Our color's starting to get pretty good. Let's see what else we got. Shading quality. So quality I'm going to want to boost to like 10, and my interpolator I'm going to change to smooth. And also for lighting, I'm going to want to turn on self shadows. So we're going to get a nicer look here. Increase our shadow opacity. See what that's looking like now. Okay, so we're getting something nice there. Let's see what else we got. Ambient color. Should change that to an orange or yellow. This doesn't really do much, I don't think. Nah, it doesn't really change it much. Alright, so let's go back to our dynamics. See what we can do there to make it a little less tall. We might have to increase our damp value and also increase our substeps. So let's start, maybe I'll increase my damp to like 0.5. See how that works. Okay. Might have to increase my dissipation too. I'm going to just increase our substeps for now. With 2. I can also increase my rate scale. With 2. This kind of makes it simulate a little faster. I also have to check emit in substeps, otherwise these substeps aren't working. Oops. Oh, went backwards. Play. Okay. So I'm gonna go back to my content details here. Let's see, maybe I'll increase my dissipation to like 2.5. Okay. I might add some diffusion here, maybe 0.2. Alright, so that's need a low number for diffusion. You can definitely see it's, maybe I'll decrease this a bit. So that's working pretty nice. Might even decrease this. Okay, so we're getting a nice, not too tall, but we're getting a nice curvature here and pointing at the top. Let's see how that looks in the render. Nice. So we're getting a flame shape here, which is nice. And we can add a little bit of turbulence to make it a little more interesting. And some swirl, so I'm going to increase the swirl 1.5, increase my turbulence strength to 0.5, see what that does for us. Might be crazy. Let's see. Alright, so we see it's a little kind of blowing in the wind. Okay. So you render that out. Okay, looks pretty nice. Happy with that. Maybe we can tweak our color a bit. Maybe make this more orange. And make this a little more yellow. There. A little closer. You can see if I bring this out, it's kind of making the edge much softer. If I bring it in, it's sharpening it up a bit. Something like that. I want my inside to be a little brighter, so let's see what we can do about that. Maybe I'll leave that there. Make this brighter. Go 3. That there. Okay. Maybe I'll mess with my input bias. It's pretty high right now. See what that does. Okay, we're getting a little brighter in the center. Maybe I'll make this even brighter. Maybe I'll make this like almost a white. There. Bring this over. Okay. This bright. This brighter. Okay, I like that. It's getting pretty bright at the top. Might want to make this even make this 1.3. Looking pretty nice. Okay. Let me just check something here. I can also increase my emitter rate. So you get a little more power there. Getting a much taller frame, so I might be able to bring some of these numbers down. So I'm gonna go maybe, or may have to increase this maybe. I'll increase my diffusion to 0.1. So you kind of get a little more modest shape there. Maybe 0.07. Okay. Computer's going a little crazy. Let's see how that looks. Nice. It's a little much, I think, still. Maybe I'll go 0.1 again. And maybe I'll dampen this a little bit more. I also want a high detail solve here. For all grids. So it's definitely making the simulation slower the more detail we have with the high detail solve, but we'll get a nice result at the end. I'm going to decrease this, maybe even 0.9, and let's see what that does. We're getting something weird here. I might decrease my emitter rate value again. Maybe go 200. And I'll go 300. You know what? I think I was happier at 100. And I'll just go back here, change my values back. I have to decrease my damp again. I'll go 0.4. Yeah, I think I'm happier with that. Maybe I'll make this taller again. I will lower this. Cool. Yeah. And then again, we can always tweak. Try to make this a little brighter. See if I can mess with the density. Density here. Like that. That's fine. That's fine. Alright. And we can always tweak these settings to get more specific result. But for a candle, I think that's pretty good.